part 2 of chapter 13 of Never Let Me Go, we see the journey to Norfolk with Chrissy and Rodney, the veterans at the cottages, and Kathy, Ruth, and Tommy in the back. Now remember, the possibles are the clones or the clone parent for these students. So Rodney claims that he saw the clone parent for Ruth, or her possible. Now, Kathy makes an interesting observation about Ruth while in the car. She says, Ruth, who was in the middle, leaned forward, put her hands on the front seats, and began talking to the two veterans. She did this in a way that meant Tommy and I, on either side of her, couldn't hear anything they were saying. And because she was between us, we couldn't talk or even see each other. So Kathy asked Ruth, hey, if it would be okay, would I be able to sit next to Tommy if you want to talk to the veterans? And it was almost as if Ruth got very defensive. They're starting to bicker like siblings. Ruth responds, why do you have to be difficult? Now of all times, I don't get it. Why do you want to make trouble? Then she yanked me round so both our backs were to the others and they couldn't see if we started to argue. So Ruth is starting to get a little bit snippy with Kathy and Tommy by the end of the chapter. So as they make it to Norfolk, they decide that they are going to go to a cafe and eat. Now it is at this cafe that they start discussing Hailsham and what it's like to be at Hailsham. And Ruth begins lying about some events that actually happened. And Tommy will chime in and say, well, I don't remember that. But I think Ruth's ultimate goal is to try to impress the veterans. Chrissy even makes a point and says, you Hailsham lot, you're really lucky, you know. There's something I've been wanting to talk to you about. It's just that back there at the cottages, it's impossible. Everyone's always listening. And she brings up this idea of a deferral. So a deferral is this postponement of your donations for students who can prove they're in love. So I'm going to read on page 153 about deferrals. You could do this if you were a Hailsham student. You could ask for your donations to be put back by 3, even 4 years. It wasn't easy, but just sometimes they'd let you do it. So as long as you convinced them, so long as you qualified. If you were two people properly in love, if you could show it, then people who run a Hailsham, they'd sort it out for you. And they asked them about this deferral. And not surprisingly, Ruth responds, well, they told us a few things, obviously, but she gave a shrug. It's not something we know much about. We never talked about it really. Anyway, we should get going soon. And that's when Tommy chimes in and says, I don't remember that at all. To be honest, I don't know what you're talking about. What are these rules? What rules are these? So it's kind of funny that Tommy chimes in and he's kind of oblivious to the fact that Ruth is trying to impress them, but Kathy can see it. And that's when Ruth turns to Chrissy and Rodney and says, Tommy was at Hailsham. He isn't like a real Hailsham student. He was left out of everything and people are always laughing at him. So there's no point in risking it about asking him about anything like this. Now, I want to go and find this person Rodney saw. And Kathy notices Tommy's reaction to this. And I think this is where we see Kathy really remove herself from Ruth and attach herself to Tommy. And that kind of leads me to the unreliable narrator. So Kathy even mentions all the way in chapter 1 that she has trouble remembering some things that happen. She doesn't want to give an account of something that happened because she doesn't know if she's remembering it accurately. So this kind of leads me to ask, is she an unreliable narrator? Did these things happen? Did Ruth really come off in this people-pleasing way? We don't really know. But in these few chapters, we see a couple themes appear, and one being hope and despair. That kind of goes with Ruth and her desire to want to see her possible, to want to see what could be possible if she were living a normal life. That also goes with this desire to grow up. Miss Lucy even tells her students, you will never be an actor. You will never grow up to do the things you want to do. Your fate is already determined. Um, it's unfortunate, really, that they don't have this option, but I think they are accepting in a way that this is their life that they're going to live.